Welcome back to Beginnings, a journey through the Bible. For a true journey never ends, finding new beginnings as you walk through the Bible, laying precept upon precept, the building blocks to life. From Genesis to Revelation, we see the tapestry of beauty throughout, amidst the suffering, sorrow, tears, laughter, love, and joys of life. Last beginning study, we took a look at the first 3 verses of Genesis chapter 1. We then dealt more in depth with verse 1 in this first chapter, specifically the words God and create. Let's take another peek at more in these first 3 verses. For in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was void and without form, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light, and it was good. We all, I believe, are guilty of creating our own theories that we place into this account of creation. Much of mankind has even pushed God out of creation altogether. But remember, we are told in Psalms 14:1, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. So are you a fool, or wise in your own eyes? For surely the heavens declare God's glory and workmanship." Job 38:4-7. Where were you when I, God, laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who hath laid the measurements thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations fastened? Or who hath laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Isaiah 40:26. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one, and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Psalms 19:1-2. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims the work of his hands. Day after day they speak. Night after night they make him known. Psalms 147:4. He, God, determines the number of the stars and calls them each by name. Psalms 8:3-4. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained or set in place, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou hast visited him? But even so, man can't seem to leave it at that, and have created numerous theories about creation. We seem bent on trying to read in or take out of the scriptures that is not there. But because there are many professing Christians who hold to the following theories, I want to address them. In all truth, we need not theorize the infinite with our finiteness. Mankind has developed 4 main theories about creation: the Big Bang theory, theistic evolution theory, the day-age theory, and the gap theory. There may be more out there, but these are the most held to theories. Looking at the Big Bang theory first and why it doesn't work. This is the belief that creation of the universe began about 10 to 20 billion years ago with a massive explosion. Why does the Big Bang theory not work scientifically? Many now consider this theory to oppose the first law of thermodynamics, which is the physical law that states that the total energy of a system and its surroundings remain constant. Then also the complexity of our solar system proves intelligent design, as it falls outside the law of probability. Consider these. If the stars were any larger, they would send out too much light. If smaller, they would not send out enough light. With the gravitation force, if stars were larger, they would be too hot and burn up too quickly and unevenly to support life. If smaller, the stars would remain so cool that nuclear fusion would never ignite and there would be no heat and light. Consider that the distance between the stars, if larger, the heavy element density would be too thin for rocky planets to form. If smaller, the planetary orbits would become destabilized. If the distance of our sun were larger, we would freeze. If smaller, we would fry. The polarity of the water molecule, if greater, the heat of fusion and vaporization would be too great for life to exist. If smaller, the heat of fusion and vaporization would be too small for life to exist. Liquid water would become too inferior a solvent for life chemistry to proceed. Ice would not float, leading to a runaway freeze-up. It has been said that Sir Isaac Newton apparently had an accomplished artist make him a small-scale model of our solar system and placed it in a room in his house. The finished piece was installed on a large table, and the artist had done a very commendable job. It simulated not only the various sizes of the planets and their relative proximities, but also was constructed for everything to rotate and orbit when a crank was turned. A scientist friend of Newton's exclaimed, "Who made it?" Paying little attention to him, Sir Isaac simply answered, "Nobody." His friend turned and said, "Oh? Evidently you did not understand my question. I asked who made this." Newton, enjoying himself immensely no doubt, replied in a more serious tone, "Nobody." There was this explosion, and there it was. Hence, point taken regarding the Big Bang. Moving on to theistic evolution and why it also doesn't work. This theory was developed to engage evolution in the Christian belief system. It is the belief that God used the natural process of evolution in his creation. This theory can quickly be dismissed in many ways. One way is the Hebrew word for create in this account is bara, meaning to create something out of absolutely nothing. Evolution is based on a slow, gradual process from something already in existence. It does not hold any weight. I would like to summarize other reasons this theory doesn't work from a professor who went from being an atheist evolutionist to a believing theistic evolutionist to a creationist. I encourage you to read the full article or interview if you hold to this theory. The full answers he gave will be placed in a link in the description below entitled From Evolution to Creation, a Personal Testimony. Dr. Parker stated that evolution was really his religion that made God unnecessary, thereby sin was only the result of animal instincts. So what changed this professor's mind? He marveled that God could change anyone, and through his wife's Bible study that he joined first for pure social reasons, God slowly convinced him to lean not on his own opinions or those of other human authorities, but to acknowledge God and let God direct his paths. This led Dr. Parker to theistic evolution, as many progressive creationists tried to fit geologic time and fossil records into the creation period. The problem was that God said in creation it was very good. How can it be good if it is brought about by war of nature, from famine and death and survival of the fittest? But if the fossils were all formed during creation week, then all things would be very good. Then consider that regardless how old the fossils are, the fossils show the same thing that we have on Earth today: famine, disease, disaster, extinction, etc. Dr. Parker admitted there were many Christians that hold to this theistic evolution belief, but these are some of the problems he saw himself. He stated it breeds our own intellectual pride and often looks down on others as ignorant. He also admitted he didn't want to face the ridicule, but God had different ways. It shows the biblical confusion also among many on biblical issues. Even the Bible department challenged him to a debate when he started teaching creation rather than creation through evolution. But he, along with two other scientists, defended creation. He admits he may not have had the courage as a professor to give up evolution or theistic evolution without finding out that the bulk of scientific data actually argues against evolution. It was this lack of scientific evidence that really reformed his outlook on the creation account. A biology colleague of his introduced him to Morris and Whitcomb's book, The Genesis Flood, and Morris's later book, Scientific Creationism. The Lord provided him with a splendid Science Faculty Fellowship Award, which led him to pursue studies in biology. To his surprise, the courses showed more and more problems with evolution. Moving now to the day-age theory. This theory believes the 6 days of creation were not literal 24-hour days, but over periods of time, as in ages. It is an attempt again to accommodate Genesis to geology and correspond to the history of creation. But here too we will see that this theory doesn't quite work either. Those that hold this theory argue that the original word yom in Hebrew, translated to day, can sometimes refer to a period of time rather than a literal 24-hour day. Opponents state that if Moses wanted to convey a longer period of time, he would have used the term olam or kadim in place of yom to denote a period of time. Another argument from those that hold to this theory is that the sun itself was not created until day 4. Opponents state that technically the sun itself is not needed for the earth to rotate. The evening and the morning indicates a rotating of the earth. God's very first command was, "Let there be light," and there was light. Prior to creating the sun, moon, and stars, God separated the light from the darkness. This was the very first thing our Creator did after saying, "Let there be light." I address this aspect further in a future video. Also, if day was actually referring to age or a period of time, that implies that disease, suffering, and death must have existed prior to the fall, which produced these judgments in the first place. This contradicts Scripture. It goes against what God has said. Suffice it to say again that we with finite minds cannot fully comprehend the infinite mind and ways of our Creator. So here I simply acknowledge His sovereignty in His creation. As we continue to study, we will see Scripture will interpret Scripture itself. God also will enlighten our understanding as we get to know Him. This brings us to the gap theory. According to the gap theory, there's a very long gap of time between Genesis 1, verse 1 and Genesis 1, verse 2. In this gap, the world that existed during this gap was destroyed, and God recreated it in the 6 days remaining, as described in Genesis. This theory also has a variety of theories contained within it. The most popular view is that Satan was reigning over the originally created earth, and this is where dinosaurs lived and also died. Then he, Satan, or Lucifer, whichever you prefer to call him, rebelled against God, whereby God destroyed all. I used to hold most to this theory. However, the more I study myself, all of Scripture, there are many holes, or shall I say gaps, to this gap theory. Here are some of the holes I now see in the gap theory. First, it doesn't match the creation account given in Genesis 1 and would contradict creation that is made clear in Exodus 20:11, which clearly states, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Another problem is it again puts death and suffering before the fall of mankind. This contradicts what God has said. Death was experienced by all of creation after the disobedience of Adam and Eve. So any death or suffering of even animals, plants, and vegetation, etc., prior to the fall, do pose a problem. These are the two main reasons I no longer hold to the gap theory, but I also believe Job records an animal that would resemble a dinosaur. I believe they did live, but that they became extinct through the flood. I do not share these theories to confuse you, but more so that you can be aware of them, or if you hold to one or another of them, you can think a bit more about why they don't fit and seek God on this issue. Also, it is a good way to be ready to share with others why they don't work, should someone approach you on this topic. But indeed, we can take God at His word and simply know that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was void and without form, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and it was good. This concludes our next step in our beginning study. Continue with me as we continue to journey and seek truth and build on the foundations of life, one block at a time. To be saved from eternal death, we must be born again. It is as simple as A, B, and C. Admit you are a sinner and need saving. Believe, which is an active belief or faithing and trust in Jesus' finished work at the cross, his death, burial, and resurrection. Confess that Jesus is Lord and allow him, through his Spirit, to change you from the inside out. Thanks for joining again, and until the next beginnings, be blessed.